Standard bearers, halt! Standard bearers, left, turn! Standard bearers, order, standard! Meine sehr verehrten Damen und Herren, liebe Gäste, liebe Spreckenser. Aufgrund eines besonderen Anlasses haben wir verabredet, dass ich Sie jetzt in deutscher Sprache begrüße, während Bürgermeister Detlef Fischer die Ansprache in Englisch abhalten wird. Ein besonderer Gruß gilt natürlich unseren Gästen aus Großbritannien und Kanada, die den weiten Weg auf sich genommen haben, um heute, auf den Tag genau, 73 Jahre nach dem Absturz der Lancaster LL687 hier in Spreckens eine Gedenktafel enthüllen und damit die Erinnerung an die Crewmitglieder, an ihre Angehörigen wachzuhalten. Die einzelnen Namen wird Herr Detlef Fischer dann vorlesen in seiner Begrüßung. Ich möchte aber begrüßen hier herzlich willkommen heißen die Vertreter der Royal Canadian Air Force, Major Stefan Benion und Sergeant Kevin Congert, Herrn Robert Thompson als Leiter der Gruppe von der Royal British Legion mit seiner Abordnung von der Bundeswehr. Jetzt hat sich Herr Oberst von Hegendorf entschuldigt. Herr Fischer wird vorlesen, wer da ist. Herrn Pastor Nuxol möchte ich recht herzlich begrüßen, sowie von der Reservistenkameradschaft Herrn Stefan Reker mit einer Abordnung. Sehr geehrte Damen und Herren, ich glaube, es ist wohl nicht alltäglich, dass sich 73 Jahre nach einem solch tragischen Ereignis Angehörige und Nachkommen am Ort des Unglücks in Freundschaft und Eintracht versammeln, um in würdiger Art und Weise an die lange zurückliegende Geschehnisse zu erinnern. Diese Art der Zusammenkunft heute ist möglich, weil es mehrere Glücksfällen zu verdanken ist. Das ist zum einen das große Glück einer langen Phase des Friedens, der Freiheit und Freundschaft nach Katastrophen des 20. Jahrhunderts. Zum anderen verdanken wir dem Umstand, dass der einzige Überlebende dieses Unglücks, der Flugingenieur David Scott, Tagebuchaufzeichnungen hinterlassen hat. Und auch diese glücklichen Umstände allein hätte es wohl nicht zueinander geführt, wenn nicht das Internet dafür gesorgt hätte, dass Menschen, die in näheren Umständen zu diesem Unglück geführt haben und den Schicksalen der Beteiligten interessiert waren, über diese Aufzeichnung und das Internet miteinander in Kontakt gekommen wären. Ich denke, dass wir unseren Gästen im weiteren Verlauf noch Näheres über die Umstände hören werden, die uns hier heute zu diesem besonderen Anlass zusammengeführt haben. Es war und ist für uns eine Selbstverständlichkeit und Ehre, Ihrem Wunsch, hier am Ort des Unglücks eine Gedenktafel für Ihre Angehörigen enthüllen zu dürfen, nachzukommen und zu unterstützen. Gemeinsam halten wir damit die Erinnerungen an die Opfer der schrecklichen, mehr als 70 Jahre zurückliegenden Ereignisse wach. Dass wir dies heute gemeinsam in Frieden und Freiheit und Freundschaft tun können, daran haben auch die Opfer des 29.04. Entschuldigung, 29.07.1944 ihren Anteil. In der Hoffnung und Gewissheit, dass wir dieses würdevoll veranstalten und für die Teilnehmer etwas Verbindendes ausgehen wird und bleibt, bedanke ich mich für Ihre Aufmerksamkeit.
Meine sehr verehrten Damen und Herren, Werner Schröder hat es eben gesagt, ich versuche das jetzt, die Rede aus Respekt vor unseren Gästen in Englisch zu halten. Und sehen Sie mir den ein oder anderen Holperer vielleicht nach. Ladies and gentlemen, dear guests, due to the special and probably unique occasion, local manager Werner Schröder and I arranged that we would share the welcome of our guests. While Werner gave the welcome speech in the German language for the village of Spreckens, I would try and like to welcome you here in English. A special greeting applies, of course, to our guests from the United Kingdom and Canada, who took the long journey to reveal a memorial plaque today, which acts as a reminder of the plane crash of the Lancaster LL687 here in Spreckens, which was 73 years ago on this particular day. Today we would like to think of the crew members and their relatives to keep the memory of them alive. In detail, our guests are Jean-Claude Charlevoix and his wife Anne, Greg Scott with his wife, Sandra Barker, Lloyd Truscott and his wife Martha, and Lynn Malek with her daughter Kirsten Perry. I would like to welcome you here in Bremervörder Spreckens. Further on, I would like to give a warm welcome to Major Stefan Gagnon and Sergeant Kevin Conkergood from the Royal Canadian Air Force, Mr. Robert Thompson as head of the Royal British Legion Group, and Lieutenant Colonel Möller with his delegation from the Bundeswehr, and Pastor Noxol. Ladies and gentlemen, I think it is not common that 73 years after such a tragic event, relatives and descendants gather in friendship and harmony at the scene of this terrible misfortune in order to remember the past events with dignity and respect. The fact that this kind of meeting is possible here today is probably due to several strokes of luck. On the one hand, this is the good fortune of a long period of peace, freedom and friendship after the catastrophe of the 20th century, at least on this side of the Iron Curtain, which has fallen 27 years ago. On the other hand, we owe it to the fortunate circumstance that the only survivor of this terrible misfortune, the flight engineer David Scott, has left diary records. And even these fortunate circumstances wouldn't have brought us together if the people who were interested in the factors that lead to the accident and the fates of the crew wouldn't search the internet for records of the incident and got in contact with each other. I think that in the course of the day we will be able to hear more from our guests about the circumstances that brought us here today to this special occasion. For us, it was and still is a matter of course and honor to follow and support your request to reveal a memorial plaque for your relatives here in the place of this terrible misfortune. Together, we keep the memories of the victims of the terrible events that have taken place more than 70 years ago awake. We owe it to the victims of the 29th of July 1944 that we can do this together today in peace, freedom, and friendship. In the hope and certainty that this dignified event was able to emerge a lasting connection between us participants, I thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Jean-Claude Chalabois, one of our members. Of course, you have introduced our guests from Canada and from Great Britain. I'm here really, we are overwhelmed by this really warm welcome from everyone. All the participation of you ladies and gentlemen, and Pastor Nuxall, thank you. We really owe a debt of gratitude to so many people in Stad, Bremervörder, and in Sprecken, and to all the citizens here. Your approval for this wonderful memorial in this community is invaluable, and it's an act of wonderful kindness and friendship. Thank you. Very, very special thanks to so many who helped us with this memorial project. Burgermeister Detlef Fischer, of course, led the works here to make things happen, and his wonderful assistant, Frau Ilona Heller. We worked together on the internet, translating. It was amazing communication. Everything worked in little pieces, week after week, month after month, and we thought we'd never get it done. And in the last month, it all got together. People really gelled and assembled it all together. We're overwhelmed with this beautiful show of respect from everyone. Thank you. We have to thank Burgermeister Werner Schroeder, very silently behind the scene, was doing all this work with his people, and said, don't worry, everything will be ready. And we found out everything was ready 2 days before we arrived. I think they wanted to keep a secret, a surprise, and it is really a wonderful surprise. Thank you so much. And then we have, of course, the people at the Bremervörder newspaper, Mr. Reiner Klofkorn. Mr. Klofkorn read our story. We wrote to them 3 or 4 years ago, and then finally we got an answer back from them. They said yes, they would love to do the story, and he interviewed these gentlemen. He interviewed Mrs. Weiss, who is here today. Thank you very much to Frau Weiss. She remembers where the plane fell and was able to identify the field, and now we find out that the actual crash site has been identified as being there for sure. We thought it was in the field somewhere, but Robert set up the 408 squadron flag at the far end of the field here, and we know exactly where the crash site is, and that to us is unbelievable. It's a real surprise, and it's really wonderful to know. Then you can rest assured that, you know, this ground here for us is considered hallowed ground. It is a wonderful place to be. It's very peaceful, and we thank you for making it so. Thank you. Also here today, I'd like to thank Pastor Nuxall. Pastor Nuxall, thank you so much for presiding over this service and providing us our blessings, your blessings on this monument. We appreciate that very much. All of our members, we have a group of 60 people, 67 people now, and we report this to them every week, what goes on with the group, and this is a special thank you for this. We also wish to thank some of our members who did a lot of background work. There are so many to name. However, there's one person in particular I'd like to mention is Lloyd's uncle, Ron Hunt, who is also a pastor. He has a church in Ottawa, and tomorrow the whole service in Ottawa will be dedicated to the crew of the Lancaster 767. So thanks for your blessings, and we appreciate that very much. One lady I wish to thank, unfortunately she's not here today, Mrs. Frau Teresa Borgart from the newspaper, Bremervörder Zeitung. And she gave us the contact of Mr. Tofkorn, who reported all this, and she did a lot of work. She speaks beautiful English, and she was able to communicate, help us with the translation of the plaque, as well as Mrs. Heller did that. She helped us with the layout of the plaque. She helped us with the photos, communication, and so on. And that kind of help we were hoping to get, and everybody stepped up to do it, you know. So we were beyond overwhelmed with all of this help. Also, you mentioned our thanks to the German forces, the British Royal Legion, the Canadian Royal Legion, our representatives from Canada, the Canadian forces, and everyone here who decided that this was a worthwhile cause. And here we are celebrating the lives of this brave crew. We thank you very much for your presence. There are several people here that we would like to mention also. We're also thinking of our members who are in advanced age in Canada, who are part of our group. One person unfortunately passed away just recently, and that is the sister of the pilot of the aircraft, Mrs. Foster. So we dedicate this ceremony to her as well. We would like to mention Mrs. Audrey Summers, and Audrey is Lord Truscott's aunt. She is the sister of one of the people that was not found, which is Harold Truscott. We'd like to mention her. We're doing this for her as well, and we're relaying all of this information back home so that they can at least have a little bit of a feeling of what's going on here today, and it's wonderful. There's another lady, Mrs. Eugenie Francoeur. She is well in her 90s. She lives in Western Canada, and she worked at the air base where the boys work, and every day she reported to the headquarters, the planes going out, the people going out, planes coming in, and on this day she had to report that our plane was missing. And today we remember her for her work. She's still alive, and she's very much active in our group. Also, we'd like to mention the pilot, Donald Ryan's sister, Mrs. Sheila Foster. I think we mentioned that. We also have a Mr. Clement Bedard, who's now retired RCAF. He helped us with photography and photos. We found the last photo of the last crew member, I would say 2 months ago, 2 months ago maybe. And we thought we would never get the plaque finished because we were missing one photo. And we found this by pure luck, just one phone call and a few research that Lloyd did, and we put the people together and we got this picture in the mail, and we knew at that point that we're coming here to put this plaque in place. So that's part of the story. There's so much more to say. Maybe later on this afternoon we can we can talk about this. There are two special people that we know and deal with. One gentleman is from Germany. His name is Yui Benko. You might have heard of him. Yui has been working for years finding lost airmen. One of his friends died in a plane crash, and he said, it's too painful. We have to find these people. And he's been going around with his own money, his own tractors, his own people, finding remains of aircrafts and remains, human remains, from people from all over the world. Recently, he had a memorial for a family from New Zealand and Australia, and they had a memorial. They found human remains. They had a special service, and it goes on regularly. There's another gentleman does the same kind of thing in England. His name is Dave Donaghy, and Dave lives in York, and Dave again goes around and he does this kind of thing for the families out of respect and in order to get closure. So that's wonderful work. Of course, our own gang, my son did the website, and a lot of people provided additional information. Peter Meleg, Lynn's husband, helped us with the mechanical pieces and all the hardware. So this is the result of that. And of course, Mr. David Doyle, who helped us with the photography. So all in all, million donkey. Thank you very much.
JC. JC, when's Santa going on? Did you ask him when Santa's going on?
Our story actually started on this day in 1944 when Bomber Command issued orders for operations over Hamburg, Germany. 13 Lancasters, 7 Halifax bombers from the 408 Squadron Linton-on-Ouse took part in this operation. 3 Lancasters and 1 Halifax failed to return home. Lancaster LL687, coded EQ-M, the Berlin Special, was one of them. He crashed in this field over here 73 years ago today. All crew were killed except for survivor David Scott. My dad's brother, Flight Sergeant Harold Edmund Truscott, was on that flight. He was mid-upper gunner. Harold has no known grave, and it wasn't talked about at home. And then there was a picture on a mantel. Whenever I asked, it was always, he died during the war. So I thought I'd do a little bit of research and try and find out what happened. So I first started about 40 years ago, and from the records I found, I knew there was a survivor, David Scott. He was the RAF flight engineer. There wasn't much information back then, so I put everything on hold, and I got my life all together. And then one night, March 4th, 2013, I did an internet search, and I found David Scott's diary online. I couldn't believe what I saw there. There was my uncle's name, the pictures. That's when I knew I found that needle in the haystack, and I had to do something else. Well, Craig's wishes was that the Canadian families know about this. So that's what I decided to do my search on, and I looked around. And soon I found Craig Scott, or J.C. Charlebois. He's the relative of wireless operator Gordon Croucher. So we communicated, and I did the task of looking for the families, and J.C., as we call him, he looked for and dealt with the crash site. I eventually made contact with all the families. Some were interested, some not so much, but at least I did my part of the job. We finally got the crew of Lancaster LL687 back together. Special note on Andy Blay. He wasn't supposed to be on our plane. He just needed to get extra points so he could go home. He was with, his normal crew was with Bully Casper, and Wally Casper had already transferred out. And I had the opportunity of meeting Wally Casper when I visited Ottawa one day. And we talked about his flights and his missions. And we talked about Andy. And Andy was a pretty cool guy. He liked him. So JC ended up writing to the local authorities, and the newspaper published a 2-page article looking for anybody who may have remembered the site, remember the crash. Some people did, other people took action. This started the 3rd phase of our quest, and that was to gather the witness reports and other information. We decided to do this memorial. And that brings all the logistics were done, and that brings us here today. Because of the generous help and support we received from everybody here and all the locals, this is for you, Aunt Audrey. We will never forget Don and Al and Bob and Andy and Jack and Gordon and Hal and David, the crew of Lancaster LL687. We will remember them now. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sandra Barker. Originally, Craig would be doing this part of this ceremony, but he's asked me to do it on his behalf. So, in my hand, by the way, I do have the diary of David Scott, which actually started this whole thing off and ultimately led to today's celebrations and memorial. When David Scott passed away in 2004, his son Craig, who's on the front row there, came across a very ordinary looking notebook when he was going through his dad's personal belongings. On the front cover is written, David Scott, a diary of my time as a prisoner of war from 1944 to 1945. And inside, on the cover, David has written, whilst I was a prisoner of war in Germany in 1944, I wrote a diary of my experiences. And as it was written in pencil and become very faded, I've decided to try and make a fair copy. Well, this is his fair copy with some additional notes that he added since then, and there's also some newspaper clippings and so on. And David did that in 1999, 5 years before he passed away himself. And although he'd actually spoken a little bit about his wartime experiences, as far as Craig knew, he simply told him that his plane had crashed somewhere in Germany and that he was the only survivor on that plane and the rest of the crew were Canadian. And really that was more or less all that Craig knew. Craig wanted to speak to you today about his father's diary. However, although he's managed to travel here and to be part of this special occasion, he feels it would be better if I read the speech out, the speech that he planned. Craig and I were a couple together for many years and we're now just very great friends. But I knew his father David very well, and I remember David as a tall, handsome, intelligent and very quiet man, a very wise man. In his later life, he was just as adept as baking cakes and making jam as he had been when he'd been the flight engineer on this ill-fated flight during the war, and later on, after the war, he continued in civil aviation where he was a flight engineer for the British Overseas Airways Company. So what I'd like to do now is just to read out to you what Craig would have read if he'd have felt able. So reading through the diary for the first time, I was struck by a number of things. For example, the page-turning quality of the storyline, the wonderful detail, and the vividly described cameo accounts woven into a bigger story. Above all for me, however, is the overriding matter of fact way that this was written. Extraordinary times told in a straightforward and unassuming way, and all of this coupled with a portrayal of courageous young men who repeatedly took off in planes, not knowing if they'd ever return. My father very rarely talked about the war, which I'm told is quite usual for ex-combatants. He did, however, tell me a couple of stories towards the end of his life, which I subsequently read in his wartime diary. Although my father had never, to my knowledge, expressed a wish that his wartime diary should be published, I was so moved by his account that I decided that others should be able to read it. The people I thought might be interested in reading my father's account were existing family members of the Canadian crew of the Lancaster bomber, which my father bailed out of. As we all know now, all the other crew members were killed, and as well as fellow prisoners of war he described and he gave the ranks and home addresses for. Finally, of course, there are the academic researchers and those individuals fascinated by the period of history and aviation details that my father wrote about, particularly those with a keen interest in the RAF and Lancaster bombers. For me, an extremely poignant aspect of my father's accounts are his descriptions of the friendship and the comradeship which existed between those he met along the way, particularly the Lancaster crew and his friend Denny, who together enjoyed terrible deprivations on what became known as the Prisoner of War Death March across Lower Silesia, which is obviously now Poland. An important thing to realise about my father is that for as long as I can remember, my father never glorified the war in any way. In fact, he often remarked how he believed war was a form of madness promoted by misguided politicians and generals. I think this attitude was partly brought about by seeing for himself and feeling deeply about the devastation caused by Allied bombers in German towns and cities. It's not surprising, therefore, that from the outset he was vehemently opposed to the war in Iraq and often spoke out against it. I hope you find my father's account of interest. If nothing else, it tells an intriguing story which, once started, I'm sure you'll want to finish. Many work colleagues and good friends helped and supported me to get my father's diary published, and I'm very thankful for that. I'm also indebted to the Poland website forum that helped identify some of the new or reverted Polish place names given to former towns and villages on the march across German-occupied Silesia. I wanted to do this to allow those interested in the route of the march to identify at least some of the place names my father and other prisoners of war passed through as their German guards drove them forward ahead of the advancing Russian army. I particularly wanted to make this a web-based account rather than in printed form, so as to allow immediate access to families and friends and all of those people he mentions, particularly the crew of the ill-fated Lancaster bomber and the fellow prisoners of war that reside now throughout the world. My final thanks go to my father and all that he describes in his diary. It strikes me that during a dreadful time in the world's history and amidst a set of awful circumstances, people remain cheerful and resolute, admirable qualities in the face of great adversity, and personal qualities that seem to me less prevalent now than in times long past. Thank you. I wish Craig could have done it himself, but thank you for listening.
Thank you, Sandra. That was a wonderful story. I think we're here right now to do this unveiling. Time to do it now. Lloyd and Craig, would you like to do the honors?
Sure.
On this day, July 29, 2017. 73 years to the day of the Pacific crash here in 1944. We dedicate this beautiful permanent memorial to the crew of the Lancaster LL687 and to all who served and who gave their lives in the service of their country during the Great Wars. May this be a constant reminder of their outstanding service and their valor and great courage, lest we forget. Per ardua astra, through adversity to the stars.
Thank you so much to everyone. From the bottom of my heart, thank you for coming today, being part of this extraordinary event. I love you all, thank you. Wonderful, thank you. Thank you. Marvellously installed. Wonderful. Good job.
The man told me we could stand on it.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Lucy. Thank you. Right here.
Yeah, there.
May I pass the phone?
Please sit down. Dear friends, first of all, let me say my English is horrible. So you have the text of my, I don't know the word for predigt, I don't know. But let me say, it's a great honor for me to be here. And let me say I'm the military chaplain of the parachuters in Seedorf and the grenadiers in Rothenburg and the soldiers in Hesendorf and many others. But you have the text in your papers, so let me say in German. Liebe Soldatinnen und Soldaten, liebe Spreckenser, liebe Gäste, liebe Angehörige, was uns zusammengeführt hat, ist ein Ereignis, das 73 Jahre zurückliegt. Fast ein Menschenleben. Ist es her, da ein britischer Lancaster-Bomber hier ganz in der Nähe des Friedhofs abgestürzt ist und nur einer der 8 Crewmänner hat den Absturz überlebt. Nur wenig wissen wir über das, was wirklich passiert ist. Das, was wir aber wissen, ist, dass der Tod 7 junge Männer aus dem Leben gerissen hat. 7 junge Männer, viele Tausende von Meilen von zu Hause entfernt, denn fast alle kamen aus Kanada und dienten damals in der Royal Air Force. Sie waren in den Krieg gezogen, um Deutschland, um Europa, um die Welt von einer menschenverachtenden Ideologie zu befreien. Und so ist ihr Tod auch Teil der ungeheuren Opfer, die geleistet wurden, damit wir, die wir heute in Deutschland in Spreckens, in Freiheit, Frieden und Wohlstand leben können. So mag man mit großem Pathos darüber denken, aber wie mögen die Angehörigen, die Familien und Kameraden über den Tod dieser 7 Männer gedacht haben? Der Schmerz über den Verlust eines lieben Menschen lässt sich, so denke ich, nicht mildern, und sei die Tat auch noch so heroisch. Ja, beten im Krieg nicht die Mütter auf allen Seiten darum, dass ihre Kinder gesund zurückkehren? Und bleibt nicht ewig die Frage nach dem Warum, wenn das Gebet nicht erhört wird? Warum, ja, warum nur Gott, konntest du das zulassen? Diese Frage bleibt unbeantwortet, auch vom Seelsorger. Aber wie finden wir dann Trost? Wie sollen wir weiterleben? Ein Tod wie den, welchen die 7 kanadischen Soldaten, deren wir heute gedenken, vor 73 Jahren erlitten, hinterlässt immer trauernde Angehörige und Kameraden. Das war früher so und das ist auch heute noch so, wenn Kameraden in treuer Pflichterfüllung ihr Leben lassen. Darauf bereiten wir auch heute junge Soldatinnen und Soldaten vor, wenn sie in den Einsätzen überall in der Welt unterwegs sind. Oft weise ich die jungen Kameraden dann auf ein altes Kirchenlied hin, in dem es heißt: Mitten im Leben sind wir vom Tod umgeben. Ja, das ist wahr. Wir sind mitten im Leben vom Tod umgeben und niemand von uns weiß, wie viele Jahre, Tage oder nur Minuten ihm oder ihr noch geschenkt sind. Doch, das vergessen wir gern. Doch warum nur diese 7 jungen Männer damals, so jung, das ganze Leben noch vor sich? Was, Gott, antwortest du uns? Was setzt du dem Tod, der Gewalt, der Ungerechtigkeit, dem Leid entgegen? Es ist das Kreuz, an dem Jesus selbst hilflos festgenagelt einen Verbrechertod starb. Die Frage nach dem Warum bekommt auch er, der Sohn, nicht beantwortet. Letzte Worte. Mein Gott, warum hast du mich verlassen? Letzte Worte Jesu bleiben auch für ihn unbeantwortet. Wäre dieses grausame Geschehen tatsächlich der Schlussakkord, das letzte Wort, dann müsste man sich wirklich fragen, wie kommen Christen seit 2000 Jahren auf die Idee, ausgerechnet dieses Mordinstrument zu ihrem Symbol zu machen? Das Kreuz Jesu aber ist mehr als nur ein Symbol. Vielmehr ist es auch ein Ort, zu dem man zurückkehrt, so wie Verliebte immer wieder den Ort aufsuchen, an dem sie sich gefunden, den ersten Kuss geschenkt haben. Orte sind wichtig. Und auch deshalb macht es Sinn, heute hier einen Ort des Gedenkens zu schaffen, für die Angehörigen der 7 Getöteten, für die Menschen in Spreckens, für uns alle, dass wir hier einen Ort des Klagens, des Bittens, des Lernens und des Trostes haben. Menschen brauchen solche Orte. an denen vergangenes Leid erfahrbar und im wahrsten Sinne des Wortes begreifbar wird. Jesus sagt, niemand hat eine größere Liebe als der, der sein Leben hingibt für seine Freunde. Und wir alle sind seine Freunde, wenn wir Jesus zutrauen, dass er auch meine Last, mein Leid und meinen Tod getragen und sein Leben für mich hingegeben hat. Stark wie der Tod ist die Liebe. Die Liebe Gottes, die alles übersteigt und nicht im Tod begraben bleibt, sondern aufersteht. Der Tod Jesu ist nicht das letzte Wort, sondern seine Auferstehung von den Toten. Stark wie der Tod ist die Liebe, die auch mir und dir und diesen 7 gefallenen Soldaten, derer wir heute besonders gedenken, geschenkt ist von unserem Freund Jesus Christus. Amen. Dear friends, God bless you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Good everyone, I'm Major Stefan Gagnon and I'm going to read the Ode of Remembrance. They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the year condemn. At the going down of the sun and in the morning, we will remember them.
We will remember them.
Now I'm going to have my sergeant read a poem from a pilot that worked with the the Royal Canadian Air Force during the Second World War.
High flight. Oh, I have slipped the surly bonds of earth and danced the skies on laughter-silvered wings. Sunward I've climbed and joined the tumbling mirth of sun-split clouds and done 100 things you have not dreamed of, wheeled and soared and swung, high in the sunlit silence, hovering there. I've chased the shouting wind along and flung my eager craft through footless halls of air. Up the long, delirious, burning blue, I've topped the wind-swept heights with easy grace, where never lark or even eagle flew. And while the silent lifting mind I've trod, the high, untrust sanctity of space, put out my hand and touched the face of God. Officer John G. McGee, Jr., November 1941.
call? Yes, the roll call. David Scott, Donald Ryan, Robert Whitson, Alan Durden, Audrey Blake, John Amory, Harold Truscott, Gordon Croucher. Rest we forget. Laying of the wreath. Beaded wreath, perhaps. Put the bowl on top.
Standard bearers, carry standards.
We can